Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Was mein Will, das geschehe allzeit, which translates to What my God wants, may it always happen. This chorale gets particularly hairy in the B section. It's pretty straightforward through the A section, but it gets particularly hairy in this chromatically dense section nearing the final cadence. We'll talk about it when we get there, but I anticipate this video is going to be on the longer side, so let's just hop right into the analysis. So 2 sharps in the key signature, we start on B minor, we end on some type of B major-ish chord. So I reckon that the entire tonality of the chorale is B minor, but our first phrase I think is in the key of D major, because we stay in D major throughout the entirety of the phrase. We just start on B minor and we end the phrase in a perfect authentic cadence. This B minor chord is our 6, of course, because we're in the key of D major. We then go to F sharp, A, D, and A. That's D major in first inversion. That's 1/6. G, G, D, and B. That's G major in root position, which is 4. And then we get D, F sharp, D, and A, which is our tonic triad in root position. Some passing tones in the lower voices before we get F sharp, A, D, and D. Another tonic triad in first inversion. Some passing tones in the lower 3 voices. We have G, B, E, and D. That's E minor 7 over G, which would be 2-6-5. Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. We then have A, F sharp, and D with a passing tone in the alto. That's D major over A, which is 1-6-4. That would likely be followed up by a 5 chord, which in this case it is A, E, A, and C sharp. However, there is a 1-6-4 chord later in this chorale that is not followed by a 5 chord. I'll point that out when we get there. Sometimes we use this bracket as well to signify 1-6-4's closeness with 5. And then we cadence on D major, D, F sharp, A, and D, which is our tonic triad in root position. Okay, looking ahead, the end of the A section ends in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor. I don't think we modulate straight away. I think we stay in D for at least a couple of beats. We get another D major triad here, D, F sharp, A, and D, before we move to A major, A, E, A, and C sharp. That's our 5 chord. It's probably the earliest we can say we modulate right here, but I reckon that this E minor chord is where we modulate E, E, G, and B. We have a transitive progression here, and it's kind of fishy to me. 5 typically wants to go to 1, not to 2. So when we're going to 2 here, I feel like this chord has a second purpose, which might be 4 in the key of B minor. E is also the sub-dominant in the key of B minor. We have some passing tones in the bass. Then we have G, B, G, and E. It's E minor in first inversion, catching a couple of the same vibes that we get from the end of the first complete phrase of the first phrase, where we have the triad that is arpeggi or inverted over the span of 2 beats. In this case it's 4 though rather than 1. So this would be E minor in first inversion. We then have B, B, F sharp, and E. I reckon this E is a 4-3 suspension over the bass, but still B minor is what's being implied, which is our tonic triad. We then have F sharp, F sharp, and C sharp, which is our dominant F sharp major. Passing 7th in the bass, D, B, F sharp, and D is our tonic triad, B minor in first inversion. Passing tone in the bass again before we get F sharp, B, F sharp, and C. I reckon we have another 5 chord on the horizon. This B is a 4-3 suspension in the bass, or over the bass, so I think 5 is being implied here. This G is a non-chord tone, this E is a passing 7th, F is what's being implied here after the resolution happens in the tenor, before we cadence on B minor, B, F sharp, B, and D, which is our tonic triad. Okay, now that the simple part of the chorale is out of the way, we are looking ahead to our next phrase, which concludes with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A major, but I think we go to A major via F sharp minor. I think there might be an argument to say that the phrase starts in A major and then quickly moves to F sharp minor, but I'm just going to analyze the whole thing in F sharp minor. just because the A happens, maybe it's just an effect of the texture because everything's moving so quickly in the lower voices, which really force the harmonic narrative in this chorale. It's driven much more by all of the activity in the lower voices in comparison to the relatively longer note values and static rhythms in the melody. So with this active bass line, it really feels like it's driving this quick moving weaving between relative major and minor, A major and F sharp minor. So I think this B major chord that we have here, B, D, F sharp, and B, is functioning in the key of F sharp minor like 4. If you chose to analyze this in the key of A, you could do so by calling this 2, but I'm going to, like I said, analyze this in F sharp minor. Passing 7th in the bass, passing tone in the tenor, before we get G sharp, B, E, and B in the key of F sharp minor. That is our subtonic 7th chord, which is 7-6. Not going to analyze this as 5-6 of 3 as I have in some other chorales because it does not resolve to 3, so no reason to analyze it that way. Neighbor tones in the lower voices before we get the same chord, or almost the same chord again. I almost spoke too soon. We have G sharp, B, D, and D. I guess we could make the argument that a similar chord is happening here, but this would be G sharp diminished, which would be our 2 chord, interestingly enough. But actually, I'm inclined now that I'm looking at this to say maybe this is another B. We have F sharp A, we have D, and we have B. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that we do go to a B minor 7 chord over F sharp. I'm going to say that this is 4-4-3, and the main reason why I say that is because we're following with a 5 chord. 4 typically wants to go to 7, which is what it's doing, but you could also analyze this as G sharp, B, D, and B, which would be G sharp diminished. That would be a 2 chord, but 7 going to 2, not a very strong progression, nor one that I would, even though that's what's literally happening here. I feel like the grander scheme of things is kind of suggesting 7 going to 4, going to 5 here, E sharp, G sharp, or E sharp, G natural. Interestingly, I want to make sure and see that's not a typo. E sharp, G natural, C sharp, and C sharp. Pardon me 1 second. I'm going to check and see whether or not that is a typo. We are right after the repeat for the most part. That is a G sharp. The G sharp did not make it into the copy. Apologies. We have E sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and C sharp, which is 5-6. Chord that we would expect to have after 5 or 4. In this case as well. Let's see if the voice. We have F sharp, A, D, and B. The A does resolve down by step. I do feel like that might be our broader harmony if we were taking out the likely chord as an aggregate of the likely tones from the whole beat, both eighth notes on the numerical beat and on the and of that beat. The chord kind of gets turned into root position here with this C sharp, but we're getting rid of the third, so I'm not going to analyze it, but it kind of happens when we skip in the bass. And then we get F sharp minor, F sharp A, oh apologies, I spoke too quickly. We have F sharp A, D sharp, and C sharp, a bit of a deceptive progression here. This is D sharp minor 7 flat 5 over F sharp, which is 6-6-5. Harmonization of the melodic minor scale. Then we have some passing tones going on in pretty much all the voices. Actually, no, this is a neighbor tone, 3 passing tones. No, 2 neighbor tones, 2 passing tones. Here we have G sharp, B, E sharp, and B. This is a E sharp diminished over G sharp, which would be 7-6. 6 going to 7 is a fairly common progression in Bach. And then we go to F sharp minor, A, F sharp, and C, which is our tonic triad in first inversion, passing tones in the lower voices before we get F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is our root position tonic triad, which I also think in the key of A major is now our 6, because we have the E natural happening afterwards. It kind of is spelling the trajectory of A major afterwards, and usually when I analyze modulations, they typically coincide with the event right before the notes that hint at the new key are happening. It usually coincides before they occur, not as they occur. So yes, E natural versus the E sharps we had throughout the previous measure. We then have D, B, F sharp, and A. That's B minor 7 over D, which is 265. We know that Bach loves 265 chords, and 6 going to 265 is a good sign. Again, one of these chords where we have the root appearing in the bass, but it gets rid of the third of the chord, which is important for the chord's identity, so I'm not going to analyze it as if it's getting turned into root position, but here it is. And here we have E, B, E, and G sharp. That's E major, which is our dominant in the key of A major. And then we cadence on A major, A, C sharp, E, and A, our tonic triad. Okay, looking ahead, we have a very interesting phrase with this chromatically descending bass line. Has a very interesting profile, ends in a half cadence in the key of B minor. And I think we modulate not exactly straight away, but almost there. We have another A major chord here, A, C sharp, E, and A. Before we go to E major, G sharp, B, E, and B, which is our 5 chord in first inversion, which also, I think, coincides with the key of B minor as our major subdominant in the key in first inversion. We've been seeing Bach repurpose a dominant in a major key as the major subdominant a couple of times now, especially recently, so it's a very interesting tool. It's a byproduct of harmonizing the melodic minor scale in most cases, but in this case we just have a descending line that brings us down to the subdominant and further to the tonic. That will then bring us back up to the dominant again, but it has this downward trajectory here. I guess technically all the way down to C sharp, but the chromaticism goes to F sharp, and then the chromaticism is broken with the E natural. But after this 4-6 chord, we have G, A sharp, E, and C sharp. This is a fully diminished 7th chord in third inversion because the 7th of the chord is in the bass. And then we get F sharp, B, F sharp, and D. Here's that tonic triad in second inversion that I was talking about that does not get followed by a 5 chord. It gets followed by a 7 chord. Here we have E, G, A sharp, and C sharp. This is another, or sorry, not, this is another fully diminished 7th chord because we have the G natural and the A sharp, C sharp, and this is where the third of the chord is in the bass, so 4-3. And then we have D, F sharp, B, and B, which is B minor in first inversion. So interestingly, we have a progression where we have 1-6-4 and 1-6 on the ends of a progression separated by 7. Typically we see 1-6-7-6-1, but here we have 1-6-4-7-4-3, 1-6. So it's interesting that we're seeing this permutation of another series of rotations of 1 chords and 7 chords. So it's fascinating. It's like just swap the bass, we just are rotating alternate triads. The tonic triad starts in second inversion and goes to first inversion. The 7th chord, or the 7 chord, starts in third inversion and turns into second inversion, so they're just leapfrogging one another, which is pretty cool. We have a neighbor tone in the bass before we get B, F natural, G sharp, and B, which is very interesting. This F natural right here. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is a note that that probably made it through the copier. This F natural is actually probably E sharp right here. So I'm going to put that in parentheses to remind me that that's actually an E sharp and not an F natural, because we have F sharp with an F natural and another F sharp. That's just a copying error. My apologies. We have B, E sharp, G sharp, and B, or D, E sharp, G sharp, and B, or D natural. This is not, wait, did I say that? D, E sharp, G sharp, and B. This is E fully diminished 7th, or E sharp fully diminished 7th over D, which would be 7-4-2 of 5. definitely a very fascinating chord that kind of gets turned into, I guess you could also analyze this as 7/6/4 of 5 as well, because if you hear this B as our root, or as our bass, apologies, as opposed to this D, it's really up to you. I feel like they're both more or less accomplishing the same thing, because the 7th of the chord doesn't resolve anyways, so the more I think about it, the more I think it's actually this D that is our non-chord tone rather than this B. But they're both accurate analyses, I would say, to describe the chord in different states. And then we cadence on F sharp major, F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, our 5 chord, making this a half cadence. And this feels like a half cadence more so than a, I don't know, an imperfect authentic cadence with a Picardy third, because the 5th of the chord is in the melody. It really has that feel to want to resolve down. But interestingly, we have this immediate pull to F sharp minor, a direct modulation where we have F sharp major, and then we go directly to F sharp minor, A sharp versus A natural here in the tenor. We start off with our tonic triad, F sharp, A, C sharp, and F sharp, with some passing tones in the melody and the tenor. We get F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, and before I continue any further, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major, so we are moving back to the key that we started with before we go to B minor, which was the overall tonality of the chorale, or at least that's what I'm postulating. So we're looking for a point in which we modulate, but I don't think we modulate until we get to these G sharps here and start tonicizing A, which is the dominant of D. So F sharp minor again. Here we have E sharp, D, G sharp, and B, with an anticipation in the tenor that is E sharp, fully diminished 7th, which is our 7/7 chord with the fully diminished 7th, like I just said. F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A. That's another tonic triad in root position, F sharp minor. Before we go to B minor, B, D, F sharp, and D, with the passing 7th in the bass. That is our 4 chord in the key of F sharp minor. In the key of D major, it's also our 6 chord. G sharp, E, B, and D. That's E7 over G sharp. That would be 5/6/5 of 5. E is the dominant of A, and A is our dominant in this chord, is a 7 chord in first inversion, therefore 5/6/5 of 5. We then have A, E, A, and C sharp. That is our dominant. That's where we would expect the chord to go to. And then we cadence on D major, D, F sharp, A, and D, which is our tonic triad in the key of D. Now we're looking for a point in which we modulate back to the key of B minor. We have this very fascinating counterpoint going on here. This is a very hairy section. It's we're gonna have to weed whack a little bit to really extrapolate what chord progression is going on here, because every voice is pretty much doing their own thing, and they're doing so in very elaborate rhythms. So we start things off with a B minor triad, or sorry, not a B minor triad, apologies, there's a G sharp in there. We have B, E, G sharp, and D. That's another E7 chord, but this time it is in second inversion, so 4/3 of 5. Neighbor tone, or it's a neighboring 7th actually, we don't need to mark that, it's a chord tone. We then have A, E, A, and C sharp, which is our 5 chord. And that would be, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Oh yes, that would be our 5 chord. And I'm also going to make the argument that in the key of, I'm going to make the argument that in the key of B minor, this is our 7 chord. We have seen 7 go to 4 in a previous progression. E, E, G sharp, and B is another 4 chord. This time it's a major 4 chord in root position, as opposed to this minor 4 chord that we had here in F sharp minor earlier. But still, 7 going to 4 is a transitive progression. It's totally fine, and albeit uncommon, there are other progressions that are significantly less common than this one, so I'm not too worried about it being a very strange chord progression that's worth talking about a ton. I think the progression after modulations often pose uncomfortable chord progressions, or chord progressions that are less normative than ones you would find within the key. So I'm not super worried about it, because the chord progression after this is fairly straightforward. We have A passing seventh in the bass, and then we have C sharp, E, A sharp, and E, which is A sharp diminished over C sharp. That is 7/6. And we get a little bit of some B minor action in the lower voices with the D and the F sharp, but it's not supported by the other voices, which makes this chord progression really interesting, because we spend the whole time almost alluding to B minor without fully getting it. Here we have C sharp, G, A sharp, and E, which is like taking that same chord progression with the diminished, or the previous chord, and turning it into a 7 chord, so we can call it 6/5. And then we get some hint of B minor here, but with the G natural suspended in the tenor, we don't fully get the B minor sound, even though we know that B minor is happening in 3 of the 4 voices, so it's not fully codified by the by all of the harmony, so not all of the voices are supporting it, but the majority of the voices are there, so you hear B minor happening here, but it's not fully B minor. We just have this very elaborate contrapuntal section in the tenor here, but we do get B minor eventually. So we finally get a root position of this diminished triad here, A sharp, G, C, and C, which is kind of like taking the chord and putting it in root position, because if we look at an aggregate of all of the notes that we have on beat 1, we have A sharp, we have G, we have C, and we have this brief E right here. So I feel okay analyzing this chord as a root position, fully diminished 7th chord of B minor, right? A sharp diminished 7. And then we finally get the B minor chord that we've been expecting after this long string of dominant functioning chords. We have F sharp, B, and D, which is a tonic triad in second inversion, probably the least satisfying of the chords as far as the voicings are traditionally concerned, and the bass even still feels like F sharp is getting the attention. We have E sharp, we have C sharp going on as well, which is alluding to more dominance happening while the tonic finally gets its time in the sun. Regardless though, this 1/6/4 chord does connect to a 5 chord of sorts. We do have a 4/3 suspension over the bass, F sharp, B, and C sharp, but still 5 is what's being implied here. This C sharp's a chord tone, this F sharp's a chord tone, this E is a passing 7th, but 1/6/4 and 5 are really the gist of everything that's happening in this very dense section here that's really made a lot more complicated by the tenor than anything else. The other voices are relatively tame, but picking out the chords from this section did require a little bit of magnifying glass work, if you will. And then we have this really interesting cadence. We have 5 effectively going to 1, but we have A natural here. We have B, D sharp, A natural, and B, and we really can't say that the cadence happens until we get these fermate here. But we have a neighbor tone in the tenor and a passing tone in the, or could we even really call them neighbor tones or passing tones? I guess you could make the argument that, I'm going to go ahead and call this a perfect authentic cadence, because it feels like we are going to a tonic triad in root position, but I think you could also make the argument that this is also a plagal cadence, because we kind of have, sorry, not 6, but 4/6, 4, right? B, E, G, and B going to 1. So depending on how you look at this cadence, whether you look at the cadence as one large gesture of B major, which is sort of how I treat it, or one kind of like a codetta, where the cadence is prolonged by the inner voices, adding more harmonic content. I think they're both valid analyses. I err more on the side of the fact that this sounds like a perfect authentic cadence. We have 5 going to 1, and everything after the fact is just gravy. But all in all, very fascinating final cadence, and a interesting way to end our analysis for today. all in all, very dense, lots of fascinating chord progressions going on in this particular chorale. This section right here with the unrelenting, repeated 7 chords is fascinating. It's really interesting to see the 7 chord get so much attention over the span of the last phrase. I really do think it's more so a byproduct of the fact that it just so happens that the 7 chords are occurring on the numbered beats and we're getting B minor fragments on the off beats. They're just never fully there, so the analysis doesn't necessarily reflect the fact, or the on-page analysis doesn't necessarily reflect the fact that there is B minor there, but if you listen to it, B minor is being woven in and around the dominants. They're coexisting at the same time. It's not an alternation, but they're woven together. And this isn't the first time we're seeing 1 and 7 interspersed a little bit more deliberately, or less interwoven and more alternated. You see them here with the 7 and the 1 and the 7 and the 1. So it's definitely motivic, or like quasi-motivic, because of the recurrence of 7, both subtonic and leading tone. I'm going to cap the video off on that note. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. If you're interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification icon. I upload once a day, so if you'd like a daily dose of Bach or analysis or both, this is the place to be, and I'd love to have you. Just as a little note, I am going on vacation tomorrow, so I will not be here, but do not worry, I have recorded videos for the 3 days that I'm going to be gone in advance, and they are scheduled to upload. I will not have access to the video footage once I'm away though, so if the videos for some reason did not upload properly, or I did not schedule them, you will be without videos for 3 days. And I will upload all of them the day that I get it back, but I double and triple checked that I did it correctly, so I don't know until they're live. I will check to see if they go live from my phone once I have internet connection, but I will not know until YouTube decides to do what it does with the videos that I scheduled to make public when I did. But they should function properly, and you should have your daily upload while I am gone. I'm going to miss analyzing because I will not be analyzing while I'm on vacation, but I will. I am looking forward to more analysis when I get back, and there will be a new video. Should be, well, at least in my part of the world, I will have a new video that I recorded on the same day, starting on the 14th, but there will be videos for the 11th, the 12th, and the 13th, at least my time, scheduled and on the docket. That was a very long-winded way of saying that I'm on vacation and I'm going to have some videos uploading in an automated fashion. But regardless, thanks for hearing me out if you've watched the video this long. Thank you so much for watching again. I really appreciate the support. The channel is growing like crazy. It makes me so happy that people are watching the videos and enjoying and going on this journey with me, because it's been really exciting, and I have come across some really fascinating trends and patterns in Bach's writing that took up until this time to really codify and see. So I'm getting a large enough sample size now to really get a strong relationship, or a strong grasp on a lot of the conventions and patterns that Bach factored into a lot of these chorales. But I am ranting at this point. I said the video is over. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you take care.